What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Subjectively Correct, a movie podcast between myself, Josh, and my good friend Matt.
Heyo.
Where we discuss a couple of movies that we present to each other each month to fit a predetermined theme that we picked last episode. And this month we're talking about biographies, which can take quite a few different forms in the long run, such as, is it about a person or a group of people? Does it have to be a famous person? Is it a documentary? Is it a dramatization? Does it have historical context, or is it more about the personality that it features? That sort of thing. And we're going to explore that with a couple of movies. Matt, this month, I should say, you brought the 1994 film Ed Wood, which I think is a bit of a cult classic these days.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, I guess it's a cult classic about cult classics.
Yeah.
To add another layer there. So yeah, I brought Tim Burton's Ed Wood, starring Johnny Depp, Martin Landau, Sarah Jessica Parker, Patricia Arquette, Jeffrey Jones, Bill Murray, and a bunch of other people. Co-written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who have also, by the way, written a biographical movie about Andy Kaufman, Man on the Moon, starring Jim Carrey. So they have...
I know that film well.
Yeah. Though Ed Wood was earlier.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it is based on a book by Rudolph Gray, who is apparently like a more or less like a serious biographer for Ed Wood. So this is apparently based on some genuine knowledge and not just the legend or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, like the title says, Ed Wood, this movie is about a man who is best known as Ed Wood. The real name is Edward D. Wood Jr., who was a filmmaker, a director during the 50s, and is mostly known for his subjectively perceived shitty movies, which is why they have developed a cult following, and people still talk about his very cheaply and quickly made B horror movies. I think his magnum opus back then was Plan 9 from Outer Space. If you've ever heard of that, that's the Ed Wood movie, I would say. And yeah, this movie depicts more or less his beginning in a comedic way. Going through, I believe, there are three movies that we see the creations of during this film, which is like Glenn and Glenda, The Bride of the Monster, I believe, and then Plan 9 from Outer Space as the final one. So we follow Ed Wood through the creation of these three movies and follow his personal struggles as well as the professional struggles of even getting these productions running, with his little to no reputation, or like little to no good reputation in the business. And I think most importantly, honestly, his relationship to other people in the business. And here's what I say immediately. Even though this movie centers around Ed Wood, is titled after him, etc. For me, honestly, this is more a movie about Bela Lugosi, who I am a huge fan of. Bela Lugosi was an aging actor during the 50s who was most known for his iconic role as Dracula in the 1931 Dracula movie, which was basically the very first movie adaptation of the Dracula story. So most of the Dracula tropes that are in pop culture, even today, are based on his depiction of Dracula. And I've been a huge fan of Bela Lugosi for years. And I love his portrayal here, even though it's barely anything close to his real character, I guess, his real personality. A lot of liberties taken with Bela Lugosi's character here. But he was a person who was hanging around with Ed Wood in his final years, and Ed Wood has used his dying fame for his B movies. If I'm getting personal here with a little rant, honestly, for a long time I've been really angry at Ed Wood. In a way, I hated Ed Wood because there was an argument that he completely exploited Bela Lugosi's failing health for his fame. And I'm still a bit in that camp, though I was way more enthusiastic about that back in the day, I guess. I cooled off now. And there's also arguments apparently from people that were around during these times who claim that there was a genuine friendship and a genuine helpful attitude between those two. So who the fuck am I to say what's the actual thing? Although Bela Lugosi's son is in the camp that it was exploitative as well. So whatever, there's drama, but still, again, this depiction of the movie is not really realistic anyway. I could go on, but maybe you wanted to say something first before I just ramble on.
Just on that thought, one of my favorite performances in the movie was Martin Landau playing Bela Lugosi. I thought he did an amazing job.
Yes.
Even though, like you say, it may not be 100% accurate to the man himself, but as far as a character and a performance, like, he stole the show in my book.
Yes.
He was just the best thing about the whole movie. And to the point, it doesn't happen very often with me, but it was one of those characters where I kind of at first had to go, oh, I think that's Martin Landau. Then after a while, I'm like, actually, it is Martin Landau, isn't it? And I just love that, where you kind of take a little bit of a second to actually realize who the actor is, because they're doing such a good job at the characterization. And yeah, it just takes you by surprise. And I thought that was really good.
I'm really happy that you thought that too, that it's like your highlight in a way. He was great. Yeah.
And I think as well, because the way the story is written, I'll talk about other things in a bit, but the way the story of the movie is written is very kind of, I guess, if you say there's some controversy about their relationship, it's very complimentary and sentimental kind of take on their relationship. Like, they seem to try to be telling the story that Ed Wood and Bela Lugosi really kind of cared for each other and were looking out for each other and kind of helping each other in a lot of ways. And there's a real, I think, genuine kind of bond formed between the characters in the movie. Mm-hmm. Whether that's real for real life or not is something I'll talk about in a bit. But
okay.
I really like that aspect of the story, though, just from a pure storytelling kind of thing, because, again, I don't know much about these characters in real life anyway. Like, I know, obviously, who Bela Lugosi is just from his iconic character as Dracula, and I've heard of Ed Wood as the worst director ever, kind of as a thing that you hear about. And I always knew this movie existed, but had just never got around to watching it. So it was interesting to see this, because I think on top of Martin Landau's characterization, a lot of Ed Wood's friends, I feel like it's more of a movie about a bunch of misfits kind of getting together and accepting each other.
Yeah.
Because they're all outsiders in a way. And like Bill Murray's character, who I loved as well. I thought it was a brilliant performance from Bill Murray. Again, don't know anything about his character in real life, but as a character in the movie, I really enjoyed not only his performance, but the way the character was written as well, because I think it was quite a sad, sympathetic look at someone who is, and whether out or not, I don't know, but a homosexual character in that era.
Yeah.
Who has to obviously deal with everything that comes with that, which, you know, I hope it's a lot better these days.
Yeah, you would assume so.
Not to mention, I mean, spoilers, of course, for anyone listening, but not to mention, I didn't know anything about Ed Wood as a person either. So to learn about his, you know, being a transvestite and having friends who were in kind of fringe groups of society. And there's a line towards the end of the film, which I really liked, where his new wife or girlfriend or whoever at the time basically says, oh, but Ed doesn't judge anybody. Like, this is just who he is. Yeah. He just accepts everyone for who they are. And you just got to deal with that. Like, there's no judgment here at all. And I think it's when they're dealing with the church people who are funding the last film, And they're saying, we can't have a drug addict, we can't have a cross-dresser, we can't do this and that, whatever. And she's defending him by saying, well, but that doesn't come into any of this. We're just making a movie. We don't really care who anyone is, really. We're just accepting and we want to make something. And I really like that as a kind of central premise to his story, because I think it's really genuinely positive and good thing about that story, where like his relationship with Bela Lugosi, where, there's, again, I don't know how true it is, but in the movie, he's got a drug problem and he's obviously...
That is true, by the way. Yeah, that was true.
Yeah. Well, interesting to know then, because, he's obviously at the end of his career and he's running out of money and he's got, problems of his own to deal with and all that kind of thing. So it feels like, yes, Ed Wood kind of leans on him as like his big star that he can put in his movies, but also that's kind of good for him because it gets him working again and gets him kind of in the roles that he helps him feel important and of use and like he's working as an actor again kind of thing. Even if it's perhaps a bit exploitative, because like there's some stuff that comes up about he doesn't have health insurance because he's not in a union and all this kind of stuff. And it's all a bit dodgy anyway when you look at how the movies are made and all that kind of thing. So it's not like Bela Lugosi was being supported outside of just being in a movie. So yeah, I'm sure there's lots more that could be explored there.
Yeah, I think so too.
But to pull it back to a more big picture, like I have to say I went into this film with a lot of skepticism because I don't like Tim Burton and Johnny Depp anymore.
I'm very much in the same camp. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As a rule, and I say that with a caveat because I do think Tim Burton is an excellent director and I do think Johnny Depp is an excellent actor.
He was.
The thing that annoys me is just, and I can totally see why they do it and I would do the same thing if I was them, but Tim Burton kind of gets into that kind of kooky filmmaking role where he's made lots of films that look kind of, they've got the same design aesthetic, they've got the same kind of kooky, fantastical story, and they're just made a number of times in different films. And it just gets a bit boring after a while. You're like, show me something new, man. I've seen this. As much as I like it, I've now seen it in 10 movies. I'm kind of a bit over it. And Johnny Depp's kind of the same for me in that he plays these great characters who are really off the wall and interesting and a little bit loopy and very strange, but endearing and all that kind of thing. And he does that kind of so often that it's like, okay, can I see you do something else, please?
Yeah, especially with Johnny Depp. It felt to me always like as soon as his quirky trademark personality acting became really popular, he just really dug into that, and nowadays he feels like a parody of himself. I haven't seen a good performance by him in years, honestly.
Well, and that's where I say if I was in their position, I'd probably do the same thing though. Like,
okay.
Because I've seen Tim Burton interviewed with Johnny Depp and he got asked the question, why do you keep making movies with Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter?
Sure.
And he's like, well, I like working with my wife and my best friend.
Sure, yeah.
And we seem to make money and it succeeds. So why wouldn't I keep doing that?
I don't know.
And I'm like,
who pays for this, man?
But it is kind of like, yeah, I get it. I would do the same thing if I was them. Like, just work with people who you want to work with forever until you stop succeeding, I suppose. Like,
I guess, yeah.
That's a fair enough way of thinking. But yeah, I'm a bit over it in the same way that I'm a bit over, what's his name? The other guy who does really stylized films. Wes Anderson.
Yeah, I thought you meant him, yeah.
It's a rant for another day, but I love Wes Anderson films. Don't get me wrong. I think he's fantastic. I love his visual style and everything. But if you say, I'm going to go see the new Wes Anderson film, I know exactly what it's going to look like before I've even seen it, And that kind of kills it for me in a way. So my point of all that being, this is obviously an early one of Tim Burton's and an early one of Johnny Depp's because it's from 1994. So as much as I went into it with some skepticism, I'm kind of glad that it's different to the style that they eventually settled into, because it doesn't have that kind of wacky design behind all the sets and everything where it's all, odd architecture and all that kind of thing, because it's very, very realistic and it's based in grounded reality. The stylized parts of it I thought were actually really well done. And from a filmmaking perspective, I love the fact that it was in black and white.
Oh, yeah.
And that it was high contrast, black and white, like not just very grey as it can be, but the lighting and the contrast level really was a stark difference between the whites and the blacks. And so parts of it are really, really dark, just, not necessarily thematically, but visually, while others are just blown out depending on the shot and that sort of thing. And there's some really cool shots in there as well. Like, I love whenever there was a few times where the camera turns from like the screen or the stage around to the audience, and all you can see is like the backlit heads of the audience sitting in the audience, of the people sitting in the audience rather. And it's just such a fantastically stylized shot in a way, but very realistic, because that's what you see when you're standing on a stage and the lights are coming from the back of the room. So it kind of lights up the top of everyone's head, but you just see a little halo kind of thing of all these different heads before you. And yeah, it's really interesting to see that on a film with that much contrast and everything. And I think it really worked.
And it also made for the black and white aesthetic for really close to the real thing with the sets of the shitty B movies that Edward really did. I think there's a huge commitment to really building them the way they were for realism's sake, I guess.
Yeah.
Putting these rickety sets back together. Though I read this weird little trivia somewhere that it was ultimately chosen to be black and white, the movie, because nobody could imagine Bela Lugosi in color or whatever. And clearly nonsense, but it made me laugh. It would be such a funny reason if that was anywhere close to a real argument.
Well, that would work for me, because there are some actors that I've only ever seen in black and white.
Yeah.
And so I don't really think of them in color. Yeah. As silly as that is.
It is true, yeah.
Or there's like, to me, like, World War I was in black and white, because that's all I've ever seen.
Fair, yeah.
I've seen obviously movies later made, but talking about actual footage of the real thing, I've only ever seen black and white footage. So whenever I think about the real thing, I think of it in black and white, because that's just what I've seen. But I do like, there was also a line in the film which kind of made fun of the fact that it was black and white. Like towards the end where, towards the beginning, where there's an actress, I can't remember which one, but holding up two dresses going, do you like the red one or the green one or something? And like the stagehand is like, oh, sorry, I can't see color. Yeah. I like the darker gray one.
True, yeah, that was good. And
that's literally what we can see.
Yeah. Also,
there are good moments like that.
Also, on that note, shout out to Sarah Jessica Parker. I think she's great in this. Yeah. Maybe her character was a bit underwritten, because she really went from supportive to kind of annoying pretty harshly throughout the movie, but I think she still delivers this role really, really well.
I think she did a good job, yeah. And that's saying something, because I don't usually like her in most of the stuff I've seen her in.
Yeah, I feel like in older films, she had some real power. I've seen a couple.
Yeah, and I feel like she fit the role well as well, because afterwards I actually looked up some of the real people just to see what they look like.
Yeah.
And they really made her look like her character as well, and which is, I think, interesting, because Sarah Jessica Parker has such a striking look anyway.
True.
So her character that she was portraying also had a similar striking look that they kind of mirrored close enough, I thought.
I do believe, though, I read that Fuller was her name. The real person was one of the strongest critics towards the movie, and was really adamant about her depiction being not good. So I don't know where that stands.
It's interesting as well, because I didn't take her character as ever being like a bad character kind of thing.
No.
I kind of could see her progress through the story, as in she starts off with Edward and being his leading lady because it's his girlfriend or whatever, and rah.
Yeah.
And then, she kind of gets the shits on because she gets replaced by someone else who comes along with some money. And so it's not even, in my view anyway, a good reason. It's like, it's just because she's got some money. It's not because she's a good actress or anything. And then, so she kind of finishes off her commitment to that film and then says, all right, I'm out of here. I've got other things to do. See you later.
Yeah.
We're over kind of thing. And I kind of get that. Like, it's not great, sure, but it's kind of life. Like that's what happens. And I can see how she would feel a bit screwed over and betrayed by that sort of action.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but
sure, go on. Yeah.
no, I was just going to say, bring it back to Johnny Depp and his characterization. I would be really fascinated to see some footage of the real Ed Wood doing interviews or whatever, or just talking, because part of me feels like Johnny Depp's performance, I have a big question mark hanging over his head saying, is this just Johnny Depp doing a character, or is he actually being faithful to Ed Wood as a person and what he was like? Because it's very much Johnny Depp character acting to the point his performance reminded me a lot of his later performance as Willy Wonka in
just not
Factory.
as high, just not as over the top, right?
Just like a little bit reserved version of that, because he had that same kind of stupid grin on his face for most of the movie and that same kind of like blind optimism as well, which everything is just like, everything's great.
A really good way to put it, because I was gonna say I read about this about the making of this movie a bit, and this blind optimism is exactly what they purposefully strove for, because Tim Burton specifically wanted to portray the story more from the sense of Ed Wood, and Ed Wood was known for this sort of blind optimism. I think you really nailed it with that phrasing. And in that sense, I think Johnny Depp's sort of trademark quirky performance really works to portray that side of him. And that also, I think this perspective for this entire story works really well, even if it's not, true to life.
Yeah.
And I think that same thing in a different way translates over to Landau's Bela Lugosi, who in this movie is full of profanity and anger and misery. I think he also is really into women. He is horny. I think that's probably one of the rare things that was very accurate, because Lugosi was very much a horn dog, from what I've read. But like from all I've read about his still living family members and whatnot, he apparently was never into swearing and shit. And that's obviously all just to comedically dive into things like the rivalry between Lugosi and Boris Karloff, which was kind of a real thing. And I love that they play it up so much. It's just super funny, even if it's not true. But seeing Lugosi scream about Boris Karloff, who, for those who don't know, is known, for example, for playing Frankenstein in the same time.
Era kind of thing,
Yeah, and seeing Lugosi scream about Karloff that he should eat his shit and whatnot is just so goddamn iconic and fun, and I love it so much.
Well, and I think you kind of nailed it on the head there, where my final thoughts on the film, like, there's a lot that you could go into with this film, because I think it touches on a lot of things that I also think these days would have different kind of opinions, such as, cross-dressing is a good one. And transgenderism kind of comes up a bit in there in a very old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
So not necessarily in the way that we would deal with it or talk about it or use the language that we would use these days. But it comes up in, I thought, a very sympathetic and positive way, because there are, like, speaking of Ed Wood's own cross-dressing or transvestitism, whatever you would call it. I don't know.
It's just cross-dressing in his case, from what I know.
Cool. Good to know. But as much as there are characters who have a hard time dealing with it and all that kind of thing, there are plenty of characters who don't and who just accept it. And like, I like that during the 3 films that he makes in this film, that he seems quite a loyal person as well. Like, he has the same crew keep coming back, the same actors keep coming back. He's using the same people over and over again, because no matter how good they are, because they're all kind of crap anyway when you think about it, but to be fair,
sure,
but he seems to accept them for who they are, and they seem to accept him as well, because they're continuing to work with him, they're continuing to support what he's trying to do. And I think to me, the whole film is the way I kind of took the story, aside from being, this is a real person and this is what he did in his life. I took it very much to be a story about misfits, really, and outsiders coming together to create and do what they want to do, and just not judging each other, but just accepting each other for who they are and what they can contribute to the whole piece together. So, there's Edward, who writes and directs everything, and it with questionable merit here and there.
Yeah.
And but then there's like the different actors who, maybe they've done something amazing in the past, but maybe they're kind of washed up and terrible now. And there's the tech guys who keep stuffing everything up. Like, I love the scene with the octopus, and it's meant to be like this huge monster scene in a lake, but it's just a little puddle because they've been filling it up with a hose. And the octopus mechanism doesn't work because they forgot to steal that as well when they stole the octopus or something like that. And it's just, it's hilarious, but it's also quite endearing, I found, throughout the whole thing, because with that optimism that we were talking about, like, none of this kind of gets anyone down or angry. Like, he only gets angry when, in the last film that they're making, when they're making Plan 9 from Outer Space, and he's got funding from the church, and they're kind of hanging around trying to tell him what he can and can't do.
Yeah.
And then bringing their judgment on himself and the rest of the cast and how everything is happening. That's the only time that he really gets angry at anyone and kind of yells and says, "Bugger off, I'm doing my own thing," kind of thing. And I really liked that, because I thought that, to me, is kind of, if that's Edward's legacy, aside from being quote unquote a crap director, like if he's remembered as an outsider who kind of brought together other outsiders and accepted them for who they are and gave them a space to create something, I think that's really beautiful and really excellent. I'm not sure if that was the point of the film or if that's just what I got.
I think so, though. I think you're on the right track.
But yeah, and there were a few lines in there which kind of, like I say, that line where she's talking about how Edward doesn't actually judge anybody and you just got to deal with it, kind of thing. I think they kind of, were trying to make that point in talking about him as a person and what he's doing. And for that reason, basically alone, is why I ended up really liking it. Because I'll be honest, it didn't really blow my socks off completely.
Fair, yeah.
I enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it. I thought it was very interesting because, he's a very interesting character. It's a very interesting period of cinema history, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of keen to now see, like, I've heard of Plan 9 from Outer Space, but I've never seen it. So
it sucks.
Well, I figure it will, but I'm kind of keen to see it now. And I'm going to watch it.
I saw it once and I didn't even like it in a funny, bad way. I hate it.
Yeah. Oh, I expect it'll be terrible. Don't worry. But I'm kind of keen to see it now, just because I've seen, it's kind of like, Tommy Wiseau films and stuff it makes me think of, where...
Yeah, it doesn't work for me that way. Edward's work, at least. And especially with the fact that Plan 9 from Outer Space has the final footage of Bela Lugosi before his death and stuff. I don't know. Something about
that's
that.
interesting.
Yeah, it's something about Plan 9 depresses me. I can't. But it's just me, obviously.
No, and I can see what you mean there as well. Like the fact of using someone's footage after they've died.
Yeah,
in not necessarily the happiest circumstances either. Like, it's not like he went out in a blaze of glory and said, "Yes, go forth and use my footage," or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, he just happened to have this, which when they were filming that scene in the movie, it feels like he was only doing it to kind of, cheer him up a bit anyway, to make him feel like he was doing something useful. And because it was just Edward with a camera and that's it, like there was no crew or anything. So there was obviously no purpose to it at the time. And as much of it seemed like a beautiful bit of footage, it does seem, a bit disrespectful, for want of a better word, to then use that and use a body double for the rest of the film and, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, though. Rewatching this, too, and I picked up more on the notion that they use in this fictional film, that Edward's intention was also to let Lugosi live on past his death through this creation. And I think that's cool, and I hope that's somewhere close to the truth.
Totally.
Because, it would be depressing if not. I don't like the idea that it's not done out of good faith or whatever. I'm really conflicted about
Well, no-
Edward's work.
Well, and that's where I found myself not knowing a lot of history about Edward or anything really about him other than that this film existed. That's where a lot of my questions throughout the film were, I wonder how accurate this is to real life. As in, it's one thing for me to watch a biopic and say, yep, that was an enjoyable film. It was funny here and there. And, you know, like I love Bill Murray when he does like serious roles. There's something about like the sad clown that he can do, which I think is really amazing. And he did that in this film. And I thought it was just, he stole the scenes that he was in my opinion. Yeah. But ultimately I do think because it is a biography and it's about a real person and other real people, I do kind of end up with a film like that with such interesting characters as well and such different characters and unique characters. I do sit there going, I wonder how accurate this is. Yeah. And I wonder how much is fiction that is just kind of entertaining me and not really telling me anything real. Because at the end of the day, I would rather the truth and make another film that's not a biography that is entertaining. You know what I mean?
I'm conflicted about that too, because we already said how this was purposefully made, you know, out of Edward's optimistic view and stuff. So it was purposefully not made through a realistic lens. And that's something, this stylization is something even in a movie about real people that I do appreciate. It has value in itself. So I don't know if I would necessarily prefer a realistic and true to life depiction.
No, I think you're right. I think that it's one thing to tell it from a specific angle, I guess. Yeah. As opposed to having accuracy. It might be more a depiction as opposed to a record.
Yeah, exactly. Sense. Yeah. So you retell not only like the facts, but actually the personality and vibes of the person, for lack of a better word.
Well, and that's where if I'm thinking generously as well, I would then also add that, you know, this is a film that perhaps is made on reputation and memories and how we remember things as opposed to how they may have actually happened. Yeah. Because that's just as relevant to the reality as well, I think. And especially when you're doing something creative like this and, you know, trying to make a point that perhaps isn't quite so literal about Edward's kind of outlook and philosophy or whatever, and the way he conducted himself and lived his life. And in that sense, I think, it's probably done a pretty good job. So
I actually don't think I would like this if it was realistic, because then I would just be sad. But in this artistic impression, I think it does it really well, you know?
Yeah. But I think overall, I really liked I did like the storytelling. I thought it was paced really well and edited well, and it kept me kind of hooked throughout it wasn't like a traditional story structure either, because I guess it's based on real events, so they have to follow that. But, you know, there was like ups and downs and all that kind of stuff, but it felt like it was just a constant kind of pacing from start to finish that just built up and up and up until Plan 9 came out, and at least Ed Wood saw that as his masterpiece, you know, whether it was or not. So
I mean, kinda is, I guess.
But I think that's an interesting climax to reach as well, because obviously in the credits it tells you, you know, little snippets about what happened to each person after the fact, and they talk about how Ed Wood went on to make hundreds of films and ended up getting into like sexploitation stuff and all this other weird, horribly bad D-movie kind of things.
Sure.
And that's cool. But so maybe Plan 9 was the peak of his career in that sense. Because I've heard of it. It's at least infamous, if not well, you know, regarded.
For sure. Yeah.
So, you know, that's an achievement in itself in some way. And
it is.
Yeah. And, you know, to Tim Burton's credit, as much as I kind of roll my eyes when I see he's making a film these days, I do think he made this one really well, and it was before he kind of was doing the same thing over and over again. And I love how the heavy contrast of the black and white film and the dramatic lighting that's in a lot of scenes, not just because that's how the films were, but just in a lot of other scenes. And just the whole editing and pacing of it I thought was really well done, and just what you want kind of thing to keep you hooked for a couple of hours. So...
Yeah, there you go.
Overall, I liked it, but it didn't really blow my mind so much. If I can put it that way.
But we can both agree that Matt and Landau's Bela Lugosi was top notch. I'm just happy about that.
Absolutely. Well, and yeah, definitely, I think he was the standout performer
Hell yeah.
amongst a bunch of good performers as well. So that's saying something.
True.
Like, I really did think, like I say, I really do think Johnny Depp did do a good job, providing that he wasn't just being Johnny Depp and he was actually portraying Ed Wood in a way that was intentional, I suppose, even if it wasn't accurate.
Yeah, no, he had walked, yeah.
Yeah. So, good on him for that as well. And I guess I'm trying to put into words why it didn't really knock my socks off, because there was a lot of stuff I did like about it. Overall, there was nothing in the story or the execution that was like that moment of, oh, now I see what's going on, or that moment of realization or connection where I'm just like, I get it now. It was all a bit muddy in that sense, if I'm being really super critical. I felt the storytelling wasn't super precise in certain areas, because I don't think Ed Wood was very precise in certain areas.
Probably not.
And so the kind of haphazard method of his filmmaking and his life, I guess, kind of bleeds into the way the story's told, which then feels a bit haphazard in parts and may not be the most engaging here and there.
But isn't that also like another point for it to be sort of authentic and unique, that his haphazard filmmaking kind of bleeds into the storytelling?
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, I still really enjoyed the movie, and I'm glad I watched it. That's my
good
one sentence take on the whole thing. But it's but I'm not left feeling like, oh man, that was cool, I'm going to go tell my friends they all need to watch this film. Do you know what I mean?
Damn. Not even for Landau. Come on. Pull the string and stuff. You gotta bring that back.
Well, and having said all that, for me, if I was going to rate this, it would probably end up on about a 3.5 out of 5, like a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because that feels right for me. Like, it didn't leave a hugely long-lasting impression, but I did very much enjoy it either way.
It's the dreaded, almost mediocre 7 out of 10, huh? For me, it's. I used to have it at a solid 9 out of 10. Maybe it's on an 8 out of 10 now. I'm a bit unsure, but I see where you're coming from. I'm not thinking that it's the best thing ever either, but it is. I think it is one of the better movies that is about the history of movies, I guess. In that sense, it's kind of up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just for its infamy, I think it's worth a watch if you're into films, obviously.
Yeah. All right.
Because I think I'd heard about Ed Wood a lot, and I've heard about Plan 9 and all these other things. So it's kind of nice to see it and go, oh, this is what everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Important education. But, okay, so that was a fictional depiction of somebody. I think it's time that we talk about something more closer to the truth. As you brought the 2011 documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
And I want to premise this with, when I think of biographies and biopics, it doesn't fill me with joy. Because most of the biography films, like the dramatizations, like Ed Wood, most of the ones I've seen have not been very good. Ed Wood was definitely up there in general.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think of biographies, I often think of good documentaries, because I love a good documentary. And there were a few that I considered for this. Like, I want to make a special mention to a documentary called Finding Joseph I, which is about HR, who was the lead singer of a band called Bad Brains. And they're one of the, central hardcore punk bands from the 70s and 80s who, if you're into punk and you haven't heard of Bad Brains, you need to go hear a Bad Brains kind of thing. Whether you like them or not. But they're that important. Basically, there's a line in the doco where it says, Bad Brains are your favorite band's favorite band.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because they've been that influential that if you like a punk band, that band that you like is probably influenced by Bad Brains heavily, kind of thing. So yeah, anyway, and he's an interesting character and all that kind of thing. So that's a good doco to see, and I would definitely recommend it. However, the reason I picked Jiro Dreams of Sushi, and I think it actually ties a little, I could make a connection with Ed Wood as well.
Me too, actually, later on.
Oh, I want to hear yours before I say anything then. But Jiro Dreams of Sushi is essentially a documentary about a sushi chef called Jiro Ono, who is known as basically the master of his craft in Japan. And this is a real person. And
Yeah.
the documentary starts off with a food writer basically saying he's eaten everywhere in Japan and Jiro's is by far the best. And, you know, it's a story about, the documentary tells the story about Jiro himself. It talks about his craft as a sushi chef and what goes into making good sushi and, you know, things even down to his suppliers and where he gets ingredients and that kind of thing. But then it also talks a lot about his work ethic and his kind of dogged determination to work as hard as he can and be the best he can and therefore become the best he can. And how that also then affects his family because his sons are his apprentices and, you know, Jiro's ancient in this movie. He's like an elderly man. I can't remember how old he is exactly, but
I think like 80 something, 86 or something. Yeah.
And while he is definitely a master of his industry and his craft, he could step aside and let one of his sons take over. But that's kind of one of the themes of the film because I think it's his eldest son is his apprentice, even though he's like in his 40s, pushing 50 kind of thing. He's still an apprentice to his father. And I think that's an interesting story in itself, but we can get to that. But another interesting thing that I want to point out for anyone who doesn't know, this documentary is directed by a guy called David Gelb, who went on to produce a TV series on Netflix called Chef's Table, which was really, really popular. And it's basically food porn, the series. And Jiro Dreams of Sushi is kind of like food porn, the documentary. Like, there are so many shots in this film where I think anyway, you just kind of start drooling and you're like, oh my God, that looks so good. And there's lots of like slow-mo and shallow depth of field and all this kind of stuff to really show off not only the food, but the process of making it. And, you know, I think it's a very well-made documentary as well as being an interesting story. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And yeah, I'll basically let you take the stage though to tell me what you think, Matt, because I'll add in anything else if it comes up later.
I mean, continuing right from you saying about how well it was shot, that was immediately the first thing that I noted down, how really well everything was captured. And I'm not just the food, just the everyday settings of these people. And I think a good documentary really manages to capture these everyday locations in a really aesthetically pleasing way. And yeah, this movie definitely hit that on the nail. Everything looks great in this, even though it's just the people going on about their daily lives. It looks fantastic, and that's something I have a huge respect for. That you can capture everything just artfully, and I can start with my connection to Bela Lugosi or to Ed Wood rather.
To Bela Lugosi, yeah.
Mine goes that far actually because the soundtrack in Jiro Dreams of Sushi, the soundtrack jumped out to me because it seemed familiar, especially. I don't think any of the music in here is original score. It's all soundtrack taken from previously existing work, and especially the string songs, the string orchestra songs. Those seem very familiar, and I figured out why, because they were done by Philip Glass, who is a composer that I really like. Yes. And Philip Glass has made decades ago a soundtrack for original score for the Dracula movie with Bela Lugosi from 1931, which is one of my favorite movie scores of all time. So I loved figuring out that there's this connection from Jiro to Ed Wood over these like three layers of separation. It's a great soundtrack anyway. It's a beautiful soundtrack. Lots of classical music in here. And yeah, you were talking about how this is about not only like their passion for cooking, for making sushi. like it goes over into obsession, really, when you hear the guy talk about how it's kind of your duty in life to perfect your job and almost like sacrifice everything for your job, it sounded like, just so you can do this one thing. You have to love your job, or you are like a failure or whatever, to be dramatic. Um, Honestly, when all of that started, in my head, I was already expecting, oh God, this is gonna be one of those like bummer stories where a dad just lost himself into his work and completely neglected every part of his life. But actually, it doesn't ever get this depressing or whatever. It's definitely incredibly like the people, the main guy, Jiro, is definitely incredibly eccentric and headstrong, but and arguably his sons maybe kind of suffer a bit from that, especially with the expectations put on them. But actually seeing them talk about the whole situation and whatnot, it doesn't actually seem like they are that bothered. They take it with humor. It's their lot in life, and they are fine with that. It's not actually like full of dramatic pain and suffering or whatever that one might expect. So this was actually really pleasant in that way and kind of inspiring, even though I do not at all agree with like Jiro's life philosophies.
Well, I think just to interject there as well, I think it speaks a lot about Japanese culture
Yeah.
and the way they think about duty and family and that sort of thing, and loyalty. Because, yeah, I think you nailed it by saying Jiro is hugely eccentric, because I think you have to be that obsessed, like you say, and go to that kind of level. But that is kind of what produces excellence to that level as well. So, but for me, interestingly, the theming that I thought was similar to, or tied it back into Ed Wood, was more a thematic thing about that kind of someone being totally eccentric and following their passions to a level of obsession kind of thing, and being a bit of an outsider in that, and not necessarily doing the conforming to what's expected or the norm. But by doing that, it's interesting because like Jiro kind of achieves excellence, whereas Ed Wood never does, kind of thing. But they've got the same drive and the same kind of approach.
And still both kind of live in infamy with their reputation, but completely different kinds. Yeah, that's a funny thought, actually. Yeah, this movie was really, really cool. Like, it's just a really, really well-made documentary. I don't know really what else to say. I do wonder though, do you think Jiro Ono ever once in his life ate at a fast food restaurant? I would love to see that. I could not imagine.
I like to think that he might have, because I remember seeing other series with chefs and things, and there's some like top chefs out there who are just like, yeah, I love a cheeseburger from Macca's every now and then.
Yeah, but Jiro, like the way he talked, like he doesn't go on vacation unless he has to, because there's a holiday. He said he walks from like 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. and shit. I don't know if he ever ate anything that's not a well-made Japanese dish in a way. I don't know.
No, I'd say that. And yeah, it is that he does have that kind of obsessive. I think obsessive is obviously a very good word for his kind of devotion to what he does. But I also think that's kind of true to masters of any kind of craft. Like if you think of like I have a friend who's a stonemason who is apprenticed under a master stonemason, and this guy who I know is my age, in his 40s, and he's still an apprentice, and he probably won't become a master until he's basically at retirement age and ready to kind of take his own apprentice kind of thing. And he's very, very good at what he does now, but he's not, superhuman at what he does, basically, which is to get that mastery and to get to that next level. And I feel like that's what Jiro's story is very much about, is, yes, his obsession and his relentless kind of commitment to what he does is why he's so good, but that does come with problems as well.
Yeah. Like
I think his sons are a great example. Like his eldest son, who is his current apprentice, or at time of the film, I don't know what they're doing these days, but
Good question.
he spent his whole life as an apprentice to his father and has never been able to make something of his own and go out on his own and make a name for himself. And whereas his younger sibling has gone, because he's the younger one, so he doesn't need to stay around. It's not like his role to stay around and serve his father kind of thing. So he has gone off and created his own restaurant and all that. And I really loved seeing him interviewed because the way he talks about it is almost with a bit of sadness and disappointment that he will never be as good as his father, even though I'm sure he's amazing. Like, I kind of want to go to his restaurant as well.
When you say you heard a sense of like a sense of disappointment, do you mean the younger brother or the older brother?
The younger brother.
Yeah, but
even though he has gone out and done his own thing, he's still like, but I'll never be able to apprentice like my older brother does, and
I don't even sure
make it to the same level.
Like, obviously, I have never met this person in real life, but through this movie, it actually seemed to me like he was rather content with where he was. They were joking about how, some customers don't even dare to go to his dad's like free Michelin star restaurant because it's like it intimidates them and whatnot, and they would rather go to his to the younger son's restaurant instead. And like, it felt like he was content with that role, with that, like, I'm not sure if he was that disappointed, to be honest. I'm really more saying I was worried is a bit dramatic, but I was really more concerned maybe with the older brother that was genuinely supposed to step into his footsteps, I guess. I feel like he really got the pressure. And then
I feel like, generally he got, I think the consensus, especially from like Western audiences, I feel like would say that he's got the rough end of the deal because he basically has to wait for his father to say, okay, I'm going to step aside now and it's all yours. And until that happens, basically, and Jiro seems like the kind of guy who would die before that happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I say, I don't know what's happened since the doco, but...
By the way, I got his Wikipedia page open right now. He's still alive. He's 98 right now. And probably still walking, honestly.
I mean, he seems like a pretty healthy together old dude. Like, I can't see him, slowing down.
Honestly, for like 86 or whatever, he didn't act that age,
Yeah.
I guess.
And he's very together and like, his mind is sound and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I like, there's a scene in the doco where, I think it's towards the beginning, where this young guy kind of comes in to just inquire about booking a table or something at Jiro's restaurant, his sushi bar. And first of all, I like what you said about everything's beautifully shot, even like shitty things and stuff. Yeah. I love the very beginning of the doco where it kind of goes to where the sushi bar is, and you have to go through an underground staircase to where the like train system is, and it's just this little shitty kind of shop in a crappy hallway. Looks all clean and everything, like it looks nice, but it's not fancy, it's not ostentatious or anything. Considering he's like known as the greatest sushi chef in the world. He's in this little hole underground somewhere in Japan. Like, it's not like a big showy kind of establishment. And like, they only seat like 5 people or whatever it is. And,
true.
And they don't serve drinks. All they serve is sushi. and the guy who's inquiring about, booking a table, he's like, oh, so, do we get appetizers and stuff? And the dude's like, no.
Nope.
You just get the sushi.
And it's like 30,000 yen at minimum, which is, I think, like $300 in most currencies.
I think it translates to about 300 Australian.
There we go,
Which would probably be about 180 or 150 or something American-ish, I'm guessing. But, yeah. It's not cheap.
No, definitely not. And you get 20 pieces or whatever. And dude, I want to go there.
And it's that whole, ever since I saw it, I'm like, man, if I'm ever in Japan, I will spend the money. And that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I think Jiro's actual restaurant is like booked up months in advance because of who he is. So I'm like, screw it. I'll go to his son's restaurant and it'll be just as good, probably, or near enough, for me, who's a pleb.
Go to the son. I don't want him to stare at me while I eat his sushi like a pig.
But I love, like, there's even a bit in in the doco where I think one of the apprentices is learning how to do the egg omelet kind of sushi. And that's like the first thing you learn because it's quote unquote the easiest, but it's just egg. But you can still obviously fuck it up because he kept fucking it up. And like Jiro would taste it and be like, it's not quite right. You need to do this different or whatever. And he'd be like, okay, and he'd go back and do it again. And you just think this dude's been making omelettes like every day for like years. Mm-hmm. And that's the start of his apprenticeship kind of thing. and that's what I think about it as more of a cultural thing where they talk a bit about honor and being honorable and, you know, having loyalty and all that kind of thing, which I feel like is lost a bit in at least Western places. Like in Australia, at least, it's not, you know, we have those values, but they're not like at the forefront of anything. And, you know, we don't value character as much as we value personality. Whereas someone like Jiro has built great character. Like he has reputation, he has loyalty, he has masterful skills, but he's not necessarily a big personality like a celebrity or anything. Mm-hmm. And I think those sorts of different values are things that I value more. Like I prefer that in people. I'd rather someone have character than, you know, be impressive through charisma or something like that. Because I just find that more interesting myself. But
do you think Ed Wood had more character or personality?
Well, that's the thing, because I think he definitely had a lot of personality, at least how he was portrayed in the film.
Yeah.
But his acceptance of others, his, you know, loyalty to his crew and to the people he worked with, as much as he was a bit of a wheel and dealer to try and like get the money to get his stuff done, he was kind of loyal as far as he could be, I felt. So, yeah, I feel like he had a lot of character and a lot of honorable kind of aspects about his personality that, you know, rang true for me kind of thing. Like more than just he's got charisma and everyone loves talking to him or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of an aspect, again, that kind of ties them together a bit because
True.
They're both eccentric people, but they've got values that are very central and kind of dictate their behavior a lot.
Yeah, that's a match right there. I would love to see them both in the same room. That would be wild. Oh, one thing though, even though there was so much food porn and everything is shot so well, like even the most prestigious preparation of fish for their meat is still disgusting. Some of it was still vile to me. Though then again, I'm not even like I'm a pescatarian, and sushi is probably the reason why I still eat fish sometimes. But even there, I'm picky as fuck. I mostly just eat the salmon stuff. But some of the preparation of the fish in here, even though I kind of gotta respect the craft. At least this isn't like warehouse, like machinery.
It's not factory farming.
Yeah, there we go. If I would ever like have to respect the farming of fish for the meat or whatever, it would be here, really. But it still looks awful sometimes, no matter how you film that.
For my money, I like to, you know, I don't need to put my face in it every day, but I also appreciate where my meat has come from and the fact that, you know, those sorts of things, those gross scenes where they are gutting fish and stuff, it's like, it doesn't really bother me because I'm like, well, that's what happens, you know, that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
But I often watch scenes like that in cooking shows or other shows where they are cutting up meat. And I often think, yeah, I can see why vegetarians hate this shit.
Yeah.
I can see why people get put off when they see this because it is kind of gross.
But even they, like Jiro, I think Jiro was it who, or maybe one of his sons, who was talking about worrying about overfishing and stuff. Like they care. They it's not like they just, I don't know, just do their job and use up the resources. They do care about the craft.
It's not like
and
a gratuitous
nature
kind of thing. Yeah. Well, I think that's true to other parts as well that aren't even meat. Like I really found it interesting learning about the guy who sells him rice and how obviously Jiro is one of his best customers, so he saves him like the good rice, as opposed to his other customers get the not so good rice because they're not Jiro.
Yeah,
and so he offers it to him first. I'm sure at a very, you know, commensurate price, but and Jiro is probably happy to pay it to get the best rice for his sushi. But even things like that I found interesting because I was ignorant to that kind of stuff before watching it.
Yeah, me too. They were like talking about, hey, if you don't know how to cook this rice, it's really hard to cook. Then you shouldn't use it. I'm like, what can you fuck up about rice that much, or like what makes rice that's different to cook from other? I have no idea. I actually wish they would delve into that more. The rice.
Yeah, I mean, I know that from cooking lots of different types of rice, I know that they all require different methods and stuff, or different, they come out differently in the end. So you've got different, it's all, basically steaming the thing, but the end result is a little bit different. So, and they all do different things like sushi rice, which is typically I know here we'd use arborio rice, which is a much shorter, starchier kind of rice. So it gets a bit stickier. So that's why it kind of forms well with sushi, as opposed to like basmati rice, which I cook with curries because it's very fluffy and longer grain and everything. And I don't know. I'm no chef.
Me neither. I never will be. I'm just sitting at the sushi, the circling, what's it called?
the train.
The train.
The conveyor belt.
The conveyor belt. It was what I'm looking for. I'm just a pig sitting at the conveyor belts and just eating that shit by the kilo price or whatever. Which also I like. I regret a bit, especially after watching this movie. Like they mentioned that too as well shortly. And like honestly, sushi is supposed to be the really like cherished, small rationed appreciation of the seafood. You shouldn't be eating it from a conveyor belt. That's kind of fucked up. But sometimes that's just life, man. I don't know.
I eat sushi all the time because there's a supermarket. Well, here it's become quite common to have like a sushi bar within supermarkets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's made fresh by people who know how to make it. But it's also kind of, it's cheap and dirty because you're in a supermarket. So, you might go spend $10 and get a bunch of sushi for lunch or whatever. And I really like it because it's one of my favorite foods. I really like it.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a bit, quick and dirty sometimes. And I'd love to try the really upmarket, super duper Jiro kind of sushi just to compare and then go, oh yeah, now I see what the difference is.
Yeah. I really want to look if there's an actual proper high-priced restaurant around here. I would love to see the difference.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, good final thoughts on Jiro Dreams of Sushi?
Oh, hold on. Yeah, I gotta give my rating too before we're so lax on these ratings. We gotta be more, we gotta have our shit together. My rating is probably a solid 8 out of 10 because this is just a from front to back really clean and well-made documentary. It's not too long either, which is always kind of nice. Focuses on the interesting things and captures that super, super nicely. I really don't really have any complaints about this, honestly. It surprised me in multiple ways, especially in the tone of it, with the people involved. My expectations weren't met with it being kind of more sad, whatever. So
like
I
more
can't.
Of a dramatization,
Yeah, that or like just with the interpersonal conflicts being more dramatic, just because it's because of these eccentric people, whatever. But yeah, I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised when it comes to that, and I enjoyed watching this for sure.
Cool. That's a win in my book.
What's your rating of this? How would you put this in a meaningless numerical value?
I give this 5 out of 5. Like,
okay.
Easy peasy to me. This is like, it's exactly what I want from a doco kind of thing.
The way I
think about rating things is basically like, not like a 5-star documentary is not the same as, say, a 5-star horror film or whatever. Like, there's different elements you're looking for. But primarily, I always think for something to get like top marks from me, it has to stay with me. Like, I have to be thinking about it for a while afterwards.
Okay.
I have to be recommending it to other people. I have
done
to
that.
have zero complaints as well, and just want to watch it again really as well. And obviously a whole lot of other stuff too, but that's the kind of stuff that I think about with this doco, and why I eventually settled on it to recommend to you, was because, I love the way it's made from a filmmaking perspective.
Yeah.
I think it tells its story very well, which is something that a lot of docos kind of fail to do. Like, a lot of docos kind of fall back on the whole talking heads aspect, where you've just got a whole lot of people telling you a story about something that happened 20 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. That's effective, but it's not very creative. And I felt like this one was more of a fly on the wall kind of story, where a lot of scenes were just them going about their day, doing their business, and then they included some voiceover and stuff here and there to kind of explain what they're talking about and what they're doing. But it wasn't so much people telling you the story as much as it was that and showing you the story and showing you what they do every day, and, you know, what it is like to be Jiro, essentially. So, that's what I want from a doco. And it made me so hungry for sushi. And every time I think about it or watch like 5 minutes of just slow motion sushi porn, I'm like, oh, yeah, I want some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. We learned about two interesting people today.
Well, and I loved how they kind of, because at first, before going in and watching Ed Wood, I was thinking, man, these films are nothing like each other at all.
Yeah.
But aside from like the literal kind of soundtrack stuff that you sleuthed out, I think there are some kind of theming similarities as well that tie them together in philosophy or values a bit as well, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's always cool.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
But it's probably time we wrapped it up, though.
Exactly. It is time that, for once,
Spin that
first,
wheel.
First, I gotta remind all our hundreds and thousands of listeners that they can send in messages if they find a way to. I know that on Spotify, at least on mobile, they can.
If you find a way.
Hey, listen, it's your job to find our address and send a letter over here. I don't know, but no, I know it. Like in Spotify, you can put like a message or whatever, a comment, and we will see it.
I think you can comment and stuff. On YouTube, you can comment.
On YouTube as well, you can just comment. Like, just find a way for us to see your little letters and tell us how much you hate our opinions or whatever. And also, we are coming up to the spinning of the wheel with the randomized subject for the next episode. Again, here the
which
reminder,
may be my favorite part.
Did you? The most exciting part of the podcast.
It's that anticipation.
Dear listener, here you can also like suggest some genres or subjects or whatever that we can slap on there. Which, on that note, shout out to Marisa, aka Japani Caddy, for giving us a whole bunch of suggestions that we added to the wheel that we will spin.
And if
now.
you do want to see what is on the wheel, you can find in the comments or whatever that goes along with this episode, there'll be a link to a list on Letterboxd, which is basically where we put all the films we've watched. And there's a list there, I think, of all the topics that go on the wheel. So,
exactly, yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to click the little wheel button over here on my device. Drum roll MP3 here. And then we will have the subject of non-English movies, which is extremely broad, but maybe that's for the better, actually, because the last subjects have been so close thematically.
True.
So just non-English movies. So
I'm immediately thinking of something that is very, this might sound silly, but very foreign, as in it's not just in another language, but it's like culturally different and challenging maybe, or interesting, or
that goes further than just the language. I mean, I got it easy. I'm German. I could just pick something from my own country and whatever. The problem is
it has to be foreign to you.
Oh, no, hey, this is just saying non-English.
And English
this
doesn't
is
count.
Saying foreign.
Oh, bloody, why does it have to say non-English?
I mean, honestly, the chances of me picking a German movie is extremely low anyway. I barely like any German movies. It's probably not gonna happen anyway. But yeah, this is opening up the possibilities right open.
Yeah.
I'm with you that it's probably gonna be something that is more than just the foreign language, that really delves into another culture and
Yeah.
depicts that, or like maybe the
Well, like I love a lot of Asian cinema, so I could like
Yeah.
list off a whole bunch of martial arts movies that I feel like everyone should watch. But I don't think the fact they're in another language is like a significant element. Like, yes, there's cultural
Yeah.
differences and stuff,
Oh, yeah.
but the reason I like it is because it just kicks ass, not because it's a foreign film.
That's a good point
there's-
though, too. Like I didn't even
There's
think
another
about
one
that.
I have in mind.
I have all in mind, so many in mind. But actually, you saying that, maybe there is stories that actually really, really heavily base on the specific language of a country. And maybe there's something to pull from that.
Well, that's where I think even like have some sort of cultural twist to
Yeah.
it, where like I think about there are some Australian films which are obviously in English, but they are so
No.
quintessentially but they are so quintessentially Australian that other countries don't quite get them or don't quite understand what's going on because it's so culturally embedded in. If you're an Australian, though,
Yeah.
you'll get it and you'll probably connect with it really quickly.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing to me is like a really good example of a foreign film, if foreign film is the focus, not say action or something. Like if you wanted me to bring a really good action film, boy, have I got some South Korean martial arts films for you. But you know, it doesn't matter that they're South Korean. It's just Whereas
Yeah.
when I think of non-English, I think, well, the foreignness of it probably has to be significant.
I think I actually might go for an actual language-centered thing, where the language
Nice.
is actually a central
Oh,
element
you
of
just
it.
gave me a brilliant idea.
There you go.
All right, well, rather than talk about this forever,
yeah. I'm
we
excited.
can do that off camera.
Yeah. All
Or
right.
off mic, whatever. But yeah.
Well, that's the end of this episode.
Yeah, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening, and hope you enjoy. And by all means, drop comments or, you know, ideas wherever you can find and discover how to get a message through.
Post funny memes wherever you can. I don't know.
But yeah, we'll be back next time with something that is not in English.
Hell yeah. Goodbye.
So long.